We do have some comments. I'll start on a couple things and then turn the mic over to Mr. Holmes. First thing we want to do is acknowledge the 12 specific questions that staff posed in its reply comments. We have worked on those questions and have put answers into writing, which we're going to pass out now, and so people have them, and we will file that after the workshop so that it's in the record of the proceeding.
All right, thank you.
And I don't intend to go through those one by one, but we will certainly be happy to deal with any follow-up questions if there are any. The second and last thing I'm going to talk about is the issue that BCP has raised regarding smart meter safety. Just briefly, the investigatory docket on that issue is ongoing. We are fully participating. We fully recognize the paramount interest of the Commission in ensuring the safety of our service to customers. We take our responsibility safely, and we're fully participating in that. We fully support and will follow through on staff's direction to retain Underwriters Laboratory for the independent third-party testing. We think that's an excellent idea. Now let's talk about this docket, and we're going to leave the other docket behind where it should, or on its own where it should be. This is a different docket. And regarding BCP's arguments and the attachments they've made to their reply comments, quite frankly, there are no facts in there that establish any issue with the operation, the termination, reconnection functions of those meters having anything to do with meter questions. There is not. Information that BCP has provided, including its attachment 1, indicate, if you want to take newspaper articles as evidence, they do indicate, contrary to what BCP is saying, that the issues are small and diminishing. Their attachment 1 indicates that the percentage of meters that fall in the consumed meter category, that has happened at a rate of 0.006%. That's not 6%, that's not 0.6%, but 0.006% of the population meters have been involved in a consumed meter event. And as the State Fire Marshal has pointed out, and as we argued as we presented in our comments, the incidence of consumed meters has been decreasing over time. There is no evidence presented in the record of this proceeding that should give the Commission any pause in determining on the merits of the proposal whether the company should be allowed to go forward with this flexible payment program. With that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Mr. Holmes, who has some specific things he wants to discuss in response to a few of the issues raised by primarily BCP. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. And for the record, it's Larry Holmes. Perhaps a really important point about the flexible payment program is that it's voluntary. A customer has the choice of whether they want to participate in this program or not participate in the program. What we're trying to provide for our customers is the ability for a customer to choose what is right for that customer in their circumstances. There are customers who will see the benefits for themselves in a post-paid program and can make the choice and participate in a post-paid program. There are customers in a prepaid program who will do much better. We talked about payment arrangements earlier, and that whole thing. Over 50% of the payment arrangements fail. The customers are overburdened by a big bill and they can't manage it. Some customers don't do well in that environment. A prepayment program puts their electric bills in bite-sized pieces, something that they can manage and work to. We need programs that recognize the fact that not all of our customers are the same. They have different needs, and they need different tools and things to manage their energy usage. Another thing to keep in mind with the prepaid program is that a customer can transfer off of this program at any time prior to a termination of service. They are not locked into the program, they're not captives, they're not victims. They are able to move in and out of the program as they wish. We're not trying to create traps for our customers, because traps don't create happy customers. And the reason we're offering this program is we're offering it to provide customers options so that they can feel that they have choices and to be more in control of their energy bills, whether it be through the prepaid program or the postpaid program. And people who feel they have more control are happier customers. The question that we should be asking today is, would the customers be better served by a choice to participate in the program or not have that choice? If you look at other utilities who have offered prepayment programs, those customers have consistently answered that question through providing high levels of satisfaction for the participants in the program. So, we've heard a bunch of customer concerns today, and obviously we can't put aside customer concerns. They're real and valid, but they need to be put into perspective of the customer also. Customers who are on these programs have these circumstances, and at the end of the day, they're happy with the program. They're high levels of satisfaction with the program. I did want to go through and address some of the comments and some of the reply comment that were provided earlier. I'll keep it at a high level and we'll move through quickly. Staff has proposed a pilot. We conferred and believe that we have a compromise position on that one. And that would be that we would launch the program as a trial that would have a rich level of reporting and tracking and analysis and evaluation that would continue until the parties are satisfied that we've got our hands around all the details of the program and the commission says we're good to go. So we're proposing that as an alternative. In a trial, I think the difference between a trial and a pilot is, in a trial, you wouldn't put an arbitrary cap on the number of customers who could participate in the program. Again, about the regulatory asset, I just want to make clear on that in asking for that at this point, we're not asking that costs be pre-approved, and be prepackaged so that they come to the next rate case or whatever the recovery arrangement is for that. We're simply asking an opportunity to do that and to be able to have an opportunity in the hearing room to make our arguments about the prudence of the expenditures, the operation of the programs and all that. We're not asking for pre-approval of the program. So I'm just trying to address the comments about, about the cost just being foisted on customers without further consideration. I don't think that's what we're asking for. We're just asking for the ability to be able to track those costs and to be able to make an argument in a future setting that would be appropriate for the recovery of those costs. Staff had made some recommendations regarding providing customer with options. Well, that's exactly what we're trying to do with this program, is we're trying to present options for customers. We concur with staff's recommendation that when a customer is coming in for service, a new customer comes in for service, that we lay out the rainbow of customer service options that are available for that customer. We think that's in the customer's best interest, and in the end, we think it's in our best interest to do that too. We also agree that it'd be appropriate to have a participation acknowledgement document. We've actually looked at some drafts of what some of that might look like. We got a sample from the APS pilot that they ran, and we typically have documents like that in a bilingual Spanish alternative. So I think that the language issue could easily be addressed in that process. I would like to take a minute and just comment on some of the statements that are made in in the Bureau of Consumer Protection's comments. In particular, first one I would like to address, in the section on page 6, and I'm not going to go tediously through lines here. I'm going to just talk about it in general. There's a statement that says that the prepayment program will interfere with mandated government assistance. We believe that's not a correct statement. The computation of assistance, as was stated by the BCP, is based on customers' income and their income level, their energy costs, and as it relates to the poverty level. That's regardless whether in a postpaid program or a prepaid program, they can still receive that same assistance. It's just it just is what it is. There is no problem with them getting that assistance. And we had in our workshop, we had the state welfare person in the workshop, and she stated that very same thing. And I am trying to keep this at a high level, so give me a little patience and I'll actually save you time here.
No problem.
There was a concern raised in BCP's comments on page 7 about how would you identify if a customer who had enrolled in the program suddenly becomes a vulnerable customer or transitions to become a vulnerable customer. Say I sign up with the program today and I'm 53 or 59, and 4 years from now I'm 62, which makes me elderly in the state of Nevada, which means that technically I no longer qualify to participate in this program. And that was pointed out as a problem with this particular program, but that's no different with a postpaid customer. With elderly customers and customers with disability, there are additional protections in terms of terminations regarding knocking on doors and the noticing requirements. We have no magic ball that we can look into and see if a customer under the postpaid service has crossed some threshold to become a vulnerable program. But what we do have as an opportunity with the prepaid program is we're going to be communicating with that customer a lot. We're going to have telephone, we're going to have text, we're going to have email, we're going to be in dialogue with that customer. And what we can do to address this concern, which would be an enhancement above the postpaid, is we could send out an annual notice reminding customers that if you're in these statuses, then ask them to then call our contact center and work for an orderly transfer over to a more appropriate rate schedule. So it's just not an issue that's unique to the prepaid program. On page 10, well, I'm going to skip that one. Let's keep moving here. I do want to take a minute and talk about the APS pilot, because I think it has been mischaracterized in the discussions today. We had a lengthy discussion with the project manager from APS as we were reviewing the comments that came in. And it is true that the pilot has ended for APS. However, they're continuing the program. They're simply sending in the report for the end of the pilot that was to be submitted to their commission. It's their full intention to move forward with a full-scale implementation of that program in the future. The project manager told us that they actually get significant customer demand to participate in that program. They're co-located with SRP in the service territory in Phoenix, where the kind of one neighborhood is in one utility and the next neighborhood could be in the other. So that a number of their customers have experience with the SRP program, And Sharon told us that the most asked for program they have at APS is a prepayment program. In terms of the operational issues that they're having that we discussed earlier, they're doing a complete rework of their billing system. And while you have a billing system in transition, is an inappropriate time to try and bring in a program like this. So they put this program on hold. They're going to maintain it at the current levels until they get their billing systems updated. In addition, they don't have the plethora of meters installed in their service territory that have the connection and disconnect switches to run this, and they're working on deploying further amounts of their meters. In terms of the questions that were raised regarding recruitment for the pilot had a cap of 2,000 customers. One of the things that we find with the prepayment programs is they're really popular with customers who are more transient. It's a very attractive program for somebody who's moving into an apartment complex and may be there for a short period of time. So it's not unusual that they have 2,000 participants and they recruited once a year, and by the time they got to the end of the year, they were down a couple hundred customers. That's not unanticipated. That's the kind of activity that you would normally expect in a program like this. So they in fact have discontinued their pilot because they're continuing the program. They're planning to expand the program. One of the things in the slides that also can be just a little deceptive is it says there's a 7.1 hour average interruption time. And in talking to Sharon, she said that's the aggregate of all customers. And what they're finding with the prepayment program is that with this level of transiency, they're having some customers who don't call to terminate service. They just pack up their car and drive away. So that it looks like you've got a termination of service when it's essentially what you really have is a customer who's abandoned that account. So the numbers that are in here are not representative of the duration of termination hours. There's also a comment in BCP's statement that the studies do not account for savings attributable to terminations. And I'd like to hand out a study that we have. And while we're doing that, I would like to turn to the exhibit where we were looking before earlier, BCP's attachment number 7. Yes,
Mr. Hearing Officer, we will file this handout along with the other material after the workshop.
Okay, thank you.
So while that's being handed out, if we turn to slide 7 of attachment 7 to the BCP's reply comments, when we go to the second bullet on this, their own exhibit contradicts their statement in their comments that the energy savings that are reported do not include, that don't account for disconnections. The study done at APS, it clearly states here that they've done it to exclude the energy reductions that were caused by service termination. And if we look at this other study, which is another utility, is that in everybody's hands at this point? So this would be a study titled "The Effect of Prepayment on Energy Use," dated March 2013. And if we turn to page 2 and we look at the writing at the bottom of the page, in particular the second to the last sentence, it says the average 11% decrease is attributed to usage reductions while service is connected, and not a consequence of service disconnection. So there are in fact studies that have accounted for the time that service is disconnected. So to say that the studies that show savings don't account for that is not a correct statement. And I think the last thing that I'd like to talk about today is the business risk. And again, I would like to refer to the BCP's reply comments, this time on page 18 at line 23. It says here, and I noticed that when we were looking at the BCP study earlier today, that they selectively chose to look at an SRP program that ran in a pilot mode for many years before they fully implemented, to look at to use to calculate the projections of how the program was going to go forward. But back in their own comments, if we look at this, it says the Oklahoma Electric Cooperative obtained 10% participation after 5 years of the program. So if we look at the characterization of customers, it's my anticipation that in Nevada we have a higher transiency rate than most states of the country. The customers who are going to find this program most attractive are going to be those customers who are the transient customers. So it's my anticipation that we will see a higher adoption rate than we saw in Oklahoma. Furthermore, as I mentioned earlier, should the adoption rate fall to 50% of what we had projected, and should the bad debt write-off fall to 50% of what we had projected, and should we use the energy savings that the BCP has kindly provided for us in their comments from APS of 7.5%, remembering that in the first year or two of the program, you have a negative benefit. Over the first 3 years of the program would have approximately a $1.2 million positive net benefit. The risk as depicted by the Bureau of Consumer Protection is based on one set of data on a program that was implemented differently and completely ignored the results that were achieved in the Oklahoma setting. So I would just like to conclude my comments again by asking that same question again that I asked in the beginning of my comments. And again, the question we should be asking today is whether customers would be better served by having the choice to participate in the program or not having the choice. And customers who participated in similar programs at other utilities have consistently answered this question by expressing high levels of satisfaction with those prepaid programs. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you. And with the understanding that there will be an opportunity for further written comment, does BCP have anything further today substantively?
I do, Commissioner. In regards to some of the comments made, as far as the participation rates, a lot of these small or cooperative utilities or municipalities. So it's important to look at the largest entity and the history that's more well documented. Mr. Holmes brings out the OEC. However, there's many other pilots as far as participation rates, Brunswick, and they seem to not match the participation rates. Also, of note, I want you to look at the last page of the study, which I am familiar with, and you can see the model and their coefficients and the R-squares associated with this. And I think that's important to take note. And lastly, deprivation is not conservation, and it shouldn't be taken into consideration. These savings, again, suffering without electricity is not conservation.
May I answer that?
Mr. Holmes?
One of the comments, or one of the things that we got back from the project manager at APS directly addressed the deprivation issue. And one of the feedback they got from their customers was that under the postpaid bill arrangement, a customer is unsure of how the bill is piling up, which results in, and this is coming from customers, this isn't something they made up, which results in them actually cutting back on their levels of safety or deprivation, as was spoken here. And what the counterpart of that was is that they appreciated a prepayment program where they had a good connection between where they stood with their bill, and they actually found that they had a higher level of comfort on the prepaid program than they did in the postpaid program.
Thank you. Anything further from BCP? Mr. Jacobson?
Hi, this is Dan Jacobson with BCP. And hearing officer, I understand you don't want to go too deeply into the other proceeding looking at the safety of smart meters, but I just wanted to connect the dots for just a minute. It seems like it's pretty clear that a customer on the prepayment program may well be disconnected and reconnected numerous times a month. Maybe not all customers, but you know, we're talking about a streamlined disconnection process for non-payment here. And so it's possible that customers may experience numerous remote disconnections and activations. Now, when Nevada Energy submitted their report in the other docket on smart meters, they did a fair amount of testing as to what could be the cause of the fires related to the meters. And they used a hypothesis approach to the testing, where they had a hypothesis and they went and tested. You know, could it be the socket? Could it be a number of things? They did not test whether the opening and the closing of the contacts that activate and deactivate service could be the cause of the fires. That was not one of their hypotheses they tested. Notably, from the conversations I've had with people at the company, the testing that UL is going to perform one of the things it will do is take a meter and open and close those contacts 1,000 times to see if there is arcing, or to see if the temperature of those meters goes up as a result of repeated activations and service deactivations. So we think it's very relevant in this proceeding, where you're considering a program that might result in more activations, to find out the results of this testing, to see if in fact more frequent activations either create torque that perhaps cause the jaws to not quite connect in the hot socket, or that there's just some type of arcing. And I just wanted a chance to connect the dots to help you see what may have been obvious, but help you see the relevance of that proceeding to what's under consideration here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobson. Mr. Holmes, do you want to speak to that at all? Or
I do, because the logic is flawed. What was suggested in the logic is that some future number of operations was the cause of 70 meters in the past having problems. In other words, what we're doing is we're suggesting that a prepayment program in the future that has a number of operations was a contributor to the issues that have been seen with the meters, but there haven't been those number of operations in the meters in the past, and perhaps that's why that wasn't looked at as a hypothesis. We're making things up, basically.
right, anything further from BCP?
Well, this is Dan Jacobson again. One of the pieces of evidence that BCP provided is that I think was 4 utilities have withdrawn the meters that they had installed that do remote activation and deactivation because of concerns over the fire safety associated with remote activation and deactivations. At this point, I don't think we know enough to know whether that's the cause or not, but since the testing is going to be done, it certainly seems relevant to what's under consideration here. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't want to get too far into the other docket, but Mr. Brooks, just one piece of information. Do you know, is there an estimated date by which the UL testing is anticipated to be completed?
I don't know that.
Okay.
If you would like put into the record of this case between staff and the company, we could provide that.
That would be helpful information. Mr. Stuff, is there anything further from BCP?
Thank you. Besides the 4 utilities, also, we know on page 3 the Nevada incident, and we can provide more Nevada incidents of a fire due to these meters. So I believe that's of paramount importance, and with that, nothing further. Thank you.
Mr. Stuff, I think what you have provided in this docket is sufficient. That this is not a docket looking at safety of smart meters. That investigation is being undertaken by staff in docket number 14-09015. Ms. Grubbs, does staff have anything further for today?
No, but we appreciate the opportunity to provide written comments in the future.
Okay, so why don't we take that up right now? The company has a number of information items that I've outlined that I'd like to see from them. The present value analysis and narrative explaining that figure and the components of that figure is one item. And I would also like to take the opportunity to request a executable version of the spreadsheet that supports that. If you could just send that to either myself or Mr. Traxler by email, that would be great. I don't think we need that filed in the docket because of the difficulty and usefulness in the docket.
And we will do that, and if any assistance is needed in operating the spreadsheets, we will be glad to do that as well.
All right, okay. And if we do need that assistance, I would reach out to you, but I would also notify staff in BCP so that everybody's aware
Certainly.
of that interaction. But I think it would be helpful to have a narrative explanation actually in the docket. The second item that I have noted was an explanation and figures of the cost components of the program as proposed by the company, especially the implementation costs. Another item that I would like to see is further specifics on the company's proposal for cost recovery and the specifics of the regulatory asset accounting. And a fourth item that I would like to see discussed by the company is, and I understand that the company might not be supportive of this proposal, but I'd like some discussion, is that if the commission were to require termination notices by traditional mail, what would the company's recommendation be on that in terms of accommodating mailed termination notices? So I think it would be helpful if those 4 items come in first, and then I would issue a procedural order outlining any further questions that the commission may have, and outlining dates by which comments and reply comments by everybody would be able to come in, and then we would pick up with a continued workshop to discuss all of that material. I don't think we need to set a date for the comments and reply comments at this time. I think it would be best to set a date for the specific information that I'm requesting for the company right now. We'll take a look at that and then issue a procedural order on the further comments. What do you think would be an appropriate time period to file the information?
I think we can have that filed by a week from Friday. This is the 4th, 5th, 6th. I think that would be the 13th of February, if my calendaring is correct. But that Friday of
Okay.
next week.
All right, that works. So why don't we go ahead and set a deadline for that. For the 4 items we've discussed today, the company will file that by Friday, February 13th, end of the day.
Auspicious date.
It is. In terms of a continued workshop, I'd like to set it out that allows enough time for us to digest the information today, put together some further questions that we might have, and to allow any further information to be developed. So I would like to set a continued workshop date for early June. Does June 11th work for everybody?
You're probably getting the first claim on June 11th for most of us, so by default it works.
Right.
No conflicts here.
This is Jermaine Krebs for staff, and I don't believe there are any issues with that date.
Okay, let's go off the record. I had you down June 12th. No, that's fine. Yeah. 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 Okay, let's go ahead and put down June 11th for the continued workshop, and we'll do it at the same time. 10 a.m. Same setup, video conference from Carson City to Las Vegas. And I know that BCP, you wanted to file some additional information on legislative history. Would you like to provide that information on the same deadline for NVE's information on February 13th? Does that work for you, Mr. Stuff?
Let's see, I believe so. If Mr. Cooper says it's okay, I think it's fine.
Yes, that works, thank you.
Okay, so why don't we set the deadline for that information as well? And it would be helpful too if you accompany that with comments to the extent necessary explaining why the legislative history is relevant. Okay, so we will wait for those pieces of information to come in, and I will issue a procedure order with perhaps further questions, but at least at a minimum asking for one more round of comments and reply comments between now and June. Is there anything else we need to cover today? Okay, I don't see any other requests, so we are continued to Thursday, June 11th at 10 a.m.